Hi, everyone. Welcome to our webinar tonight. And thanks for making it over. How's everyone doing? Actually, yeah, it's a webinar. Hey, Scott, how's it going?
Good, how are you?
Good. Yeah, I'm good. Kieran, Emma, how's everyone doing?
Hey, everyone. Good to see you all.
That's good. All right. Yeah, sorry. I just a bit of a delay from my end. Welcome everyone to tonight's webinar on the recent ASA announcement on the GAMSAT result changes and the validity of results moving forward. We have a team of wonderful panel members here. So Scott, Kieran and Emma, just to talk to you all about just sort of what this all means and how this is all going to affect the GAMSAT and medical applications moving forward. I'll just hand it over to you guys.
Cool. Thanks, Carmen. Yeah, I guess from the outset, we should probably just say that the content and the opinions in tonight's webinar are just the views of ourselves. They're not the views of the universities or any of the peak institutions. So especially given this is a relatively hot take, you should be treating it just as that and definitely not as something that is fully sanctioned and very well understood just yet. So yeah, hopefully nonetheless, getting some info nice and early and having a bit of a chat about it will prove beneficial. As we do with most webinars, please put your questions in the Q&A down the bottom in the toolbar, along with any just general banter or maybe answers or commentary in the chat as well. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Dr. Scott Fraser. I'm the founder and CEO here at Fraser's Medical. Been doing this for a fair while and here because I found this news to be particularly interesting and you know, being sort of old man GAMSAT, it gives me an opportunity to wave my stick at the air. So I thought I would. Emma, did you want to introduce yourself?
Absolutely. So my name's Emma. I'm currently one of the interview tutors at Fraser's. I've also just finished my first year of a 4-year medical program at UQ. So 3 to go, which feels pretty exciting. And yeah, I just think this is a really interesting topic to kind of chat about and hopefully can contribute to the many numerous discussions out there.
Lovely. Kieran?
Yeah, awesome. Hi, everybody. My name is Kieran. I'm also very excited to be here today. I have been lucky enough this year to kind of start medicine at UQ, so I'll actually be joining Emma next year up there. The reason I guess I'm here today is to offer a little perspective from somebody that has kind of gone through the application cycles for the last few years, and obviously just to contribute and add to the speculations of how things will change.
Yeah, and Kieran, Kaiwan, did you want to give a little? Are you moderating? Are you kind of the Q&A moderator of sorts, or?
Yes, yeah. So I'll be answering all the questions in the Q&A. So everyone just type any question you have about anything under the sun, especially about GAMSAT down in the Q&A, and I'll get to you. But I just finished my 2nd year at the University of Melbourne, so I'm heading into my 3rd year of medicine next year. I've been exactly in your position, probably. About to sit the GAMSAT, and I actually sat the GAMSAT 4 times before I ended up breaking through. So I know what it feels like to be a little bit anxious at this time, especially when the next sitting is just around the corner. So hopefully I can add a bit more perspective into some questions that you'll have.
What a great segue, having sat it 4 times. We did not get you on this webinar pre-planned under those guises. Cool. So what we're going to cover today is just changes to the currency of the GAMSAT, and potentially, and I think this is where we're going full conspiracy theory, how it's going to change the landscape of things. Just a bit of a reminder on the key dates for March, and then we'll do some Q&A. we'll be working the Q&A, I guess, pretty heavily in the meantime, but please do, like, if you want to have whoever's moderating interject on your behalf, they certainly can. In many senses, this is the equivalent of microphones on. We don't mind stopping for really good questions. Alrighty, so the changes of results is that for certain universities, we'll get up to 4 consecutive years of currency for a GAMSAT score in Australia. Pardon me. While we'll remain at 2 consecutive years in the UK and Ireland. So to date, I don't think we know what universities those will be. Has that been specified in any of the communications that we know to date, Peeps?
I haven't heard anything. I suspect that this will probably be released in the GEMSAS guide for next year's application. True.
So yeah, and that's not too far away. The GEMSAS guide should be released. Great little read. If you not sure why it's not a New York Times bestseller given the number of people that read it. Yeah, if you are a prospective GAMSAT student, especially if you've never sat the GAMSAT before, it is definitely a guide that you should be reading. It has a wealth of information there, not just on the process, but also on the different institutions, their scores, quotas, intake methods, all that sort of stuff. So that will, I agree, probably be where that's outlined. But yeah, 4 years is a big shift from 2 years. It's interesting that it's remaining at 2 years in the UK and Ireland. That's probably because nothing's really changing over there, except for the removal of the BMAT, which is probably a separate webinar, but I'm not sure if anyone heard about that, the BMAT's getting cancelled, not for Twitter-based reasons, but I think just genuinely they worked out they've got enough tests with the UCAT and the GAMSAT, so they're sticking with that. So yeah, 4 years after the test date. What's your hot take on that, Emma, on the 4-year shift?
Well, I think I'm probably the most optimistic, I'm guessing, going to be about it. I think it's going to be really beneficial because it allows someone to kind of sit the GAMSAT when they feel ready, but maybe they're not ready yet to apply. Medicine's definitely really full on, which I'm sure many people understand, but you may not be in the right financial setting or life stage to be able to like take it and apply immediately after. So I think this is really going to open up a lot of doors for people. I think there is some theory about what that means for scores, what that means for competitive applications, which I know we're going to dive into. But I think overall, I feel pretty optimistic about this. It does kind of more closely align with the US strategy with the MCAT. That's also valid for 4 years as well, or maybe 5. So I wonder if it's kind of, as Australia is moving to a more post-grad medicine heavy kind of format, they want to make kind of the whole application process as similar so that then, I know there's been issues in the past with like the bachelors of medicine, bachelors of surgery transferring and all of that headache. So I think there's maybe a bit of a movement to move to a more kind of unified front on that arena. So I think overall I'm optimistic.
That's a great take. I really like that. And am I allowed to extrapolate? Emma, are you Canadian?
No, I'm actually Australian by citizenship,
Okay.
but I moved to the US when I was in high school with my parents. So I did my undergrad and master's in the US. And then unlike Kaiwan, I only took the GAMSAT once. I took it in a complete bubble. I knew no one else who was taking it. I had no idea what to do. So I had a really, really unique GAMSAT experience and then got my scores and kind of was like, oh, I think I should apply. So yeah, a really isolated experience, which was very beneficial, but also really nerve-wracking at the same time. Just reading scary things online and also feeling the pressure of like, I have to use it or lose it. So I think this is going to release a bit of pressure from students who are in that scenario as well.
I like it. I can see how the use it or lose it analogy is a very good one if you do happen to score well straight sort of out of the gates. So. And you do see that with students, so that's very good. Kieran, your takes?
Sure, maybe I see a kind of good cop, bad cop dynamic developing here. I think Emma is perhaps a little bit more optimistic than I am. I agree. I think that there are certainly positives to this, but I also suspect, and it's probably something that we'll cover in a little bit, Scott, that this might actually make things a little bit more competitive as well. We'll delve into it in just a moment, but I guess I just want to preface that by also saying, like, medicine's always been competitive. I know that students in general, they always hear like, oh, it's getting more competitive, and they kind of hear that as a, as perhaps, or they see that as a sign that, they won't get in or whatever it may be. Year on year, it's gotten more competitive, and year on year, people have gotten in. So maybe I'll just kind of throw that in now before we kind of start dissecting it all. And, maybe people walk out of here feeling like, oh, geez, maybe there's no chance or anything along those lines. There definitely still is. Maybe the rules have changed, but that doesn't mean that the path forward, that doesn't mean that the path forward doesn't exist anymore. The kind of the way to approach the GAMSAT, your goals should still really be the same. Now, maybe it's just a little bit tougher, but medicine is tough. Getting in is part of it. It just makes getting in that much sweeter. As somebody that got rejected twice from medicine and got in on the third time, I can tell you, I don't think I would have liked it. I wouldn't have enjoyed it if I'd gotten in that first time. So, I think maybe that's the takeaway here. I'm seeing you, Scott, kind of make a bit of a face. These are the things we say to cope. So perhaps that's what it is. But I'm still going to stick with that, that belief.
I mean, Emma looks quite happy off her first go, so I think you'd be happy
I will
either
say
way.
It was not my first go. It was my first go in Australia, but it was not my first go in the US. So I understand the pain. I do think rejection is actually like an integral part of the application process, but that's a very different scale. It's a whole different system in the US. That's a whole different conversation. But I do think rejection is important. I think you have to really know you want to do it.
Yeah. Kaiwan, what's your thoughts?
Yeah, so I just want to sort of raise maybe a couple of things that sort of struck me straight away when I found out about this change. And one of the things that I first sort of thought of was about students that were in a sort of unique position where they have sort of maybe a lower GPA than what they'd expect at the time of their application. As most people here probably know that the GAMSAT is something that you can sit every single year. Essentially, every sitting is a clean slate. But if you falter with your GPA along the way, sometimes that could be really difficult to sort of bring that back up. And in the prior system with only a 2-year GAMSAT currency, if you wanted to fix your GPA by doing like an honors or by doing additional sort of like subjects, it might have been a little bit difficult to do that because your GAMSAT score might have expired. And then because of that, you would have to sit the GAMSAT again and score really, really well again, whilst also focusing on sort of getting your GPA up. So I feel like for students that might not have the best GPA in this case, this 4-year validity might actually be a huge benefit because you have time now to focus on your GPA after getting that really good GAMSAT score. Just going from my own experience, I was in that unique position where I didn't have a good GAMSAT score. My GPA was actually pretty good, but I do know a lot of my friends who also tried to get in at the same time as I did, who had the opposite. And they were really frustrated because they thought that, their GAMSAT score was amazing, but they just didn't quite have the GPA to get into the university that they wanted to. So I feel like, I guess that was the first thing that really struck to me when I saw this, and I just sort of rejoiced for those students who are in that particular pool. So that's really my 2 cents on it.
No, those are, round that up, make it 3 cents and round it up to 5. I mean, it's a very, very, very good thought. As someone that went through all of undergrad, never getting a single high distinction, that would have been outstanding for me as well. So I can definitely resonate with that strongly. And there's also a quota there of people that come from the type of degrees. Nursing is a really good example. And that's actually all I've got. Paramedicine a lot of the time, where a lot of the assessment is pass-fail because it's extremely practical. So they don't have as many subjects or as much opportunity to be as academic. And then if they make that decision later on, very mature decision, very informed decision to make that career switch, then they go back to their GPA and all of a sudden it's, you know, they didn't have that same sort of fire burning underneath them the way a, you know, a biomed from Monash does as a comparable. So yeah, it is kind of nice for them because they can then they've got time to do something about it rather than it's being a panic as well as having to juggle everything at once. Yeah, so I like that. Good take.
Great.
Cool. So how will this affect the applications? So a little bit of maths. Everyone loves maths. Very debatable. So let's just assume some numbers. So about 15,000 people sitting the GAMSAT each year, give or take. That's I think quite conservative, sort of on the lower end. When you think about the number of students, therefore in the top 10th percentile, that's going to be around about 1,500. That's not the hardest maths in the world. Correlating that to about 750, 800 medical spots in Australia. So I'm not factoring in, I know we've got a couple of people already that I can see on the call from Ireland and the UK. So this is not factoring in those institutions. So I apologize for being Southern Hemisphere centric when I put this together. But hopefully this is still a beneficial exercise. You had around about, like if you were in that top 1,500, you felt pretty good that you were going to be at least within the realms of interviews, given that you, pardon me, you interview more people than you take, depending on the university. So UQ, as an example, is about a 4-to-1 ratio. They'll interview about 4 people for every person they take. Other unis, it's closer to 1.5-to-1. So saying about 2-to-1 is a reasonable assessment. And as a result, you know, being in that sort of top 10th percentile had you feeling pretty good. Top 10th percentile is usually about a 68, 69 overall on the GAMSAT. Top 5th percentile is usually about a 72 there and about. So those were the scores that you were getting to feel pretty confident around your outcomes. Now, if we're going to extend that to 4 years, then we need to understand how many people would potentially be applying each year. And already, even in the discussions, I think some of my logic and deduction putting this together is immediately kind of disproven. But we will still see it for the purposes of undertaking an exercise and learning from said exercise. So with 2 years, you've got about 800 people that are going to have those 70+ scores. Remembering that a lot of those will then go into med. There'll only be about 50 to 100 left over. It'll carry over to the next year. When you factor in the GPA, as Carmen said, there'll be some people with great scores. And then the GPA needs to be improved. So they probably won't go in straight away. Or maybe that'll allow people with lower GAMSAT scores to sort of leapfrog those. There are some people that sit early for fun. Yes, for fun. And it's becoming more and more of a phenomena with first years, even getting a few year 12s asking those questions nowadays, which is mind-boggling and scary. We've also got other things like quotas, rurality, and what have you that will help open up the pool for all the right reasons. Thank you to the university's AMA and AMC and whatnot for all of that to make sure that we get the right professionals in the right areas. And then we also had the portfolio institutions that are really looking holistically at the individual. And it was very common to hear from those institutions, people with really high scores missing out, and then people with lower scores, but outstanding portfolios, outstanding all aspects of their lives doing well and getting in. So all of those things considered meant that you had people with sub 70 scores still feeling competitive. If you're close to 70, you still felt like you were a real shot. And as a result, you could kind of wait till next year and still feel that your score was pretty solid. You didn't need to be constantly repeating it to get it up to some sort of a level. The other thing is that the previous year's sitters only affected you in the following year. there wasn't a constant sort of conveyor belt of people sort of just pushing you and pushing you and pushing you, which is interestingly something that we see at the other end of the medical training sort of timeline. But that's potentially for another day. When you turn that into sort of a 4-year situation, well, that pool literally doubles. And now that it's at a level where it's actually more people than places that are available in medical school by quite a factor. So that should be the immediate thing that's obvious. Now, the GPA will play a role, as Carmen said. So it could be a case of people sitting the exam, scoring very well, going, cool, I've got that under control now. I'm going to go and take care of my GPA because maybe I need to do honors, masters, something like that, or maybe I need to do a whole nother degree, but I can, and I can do that in quite a less stress fashion to solve that problem. But a lot of people will still be throwing in applications relatively quickly. The number of early sitters will have less of an effect because the pool is so big. So you used to subtract high scoring early sitters out of the pool, and they were a reasonable cohort of the high scorers. Now the pool will still be very big, so that's not really an effect. Quotas, they'll still be the same. So it means that the CSP spots will be slightly more competitive. And then the portfolio institutions, well, UND is going to be removing the portfolios at this stage. So that's how they go forward. No one knows. Official announcements forthcoming, and I'm sure another reason to get ready for the GEMSAT guide and potentially the updates to their website around exactly what's going to happen there. But that could, I think, will mean that the scores will drastically shoot up there, particularly in the very popular city of Sydney. So the outcome of that is you just have so many people with these really high GAMSAT scores that you will need to be within the pool of those really high GAMSAT scores, because high GPAs are actually, they're becoming, at least what I've noticed over sort of my years doing this, they're starting to get more and more common. Like people now think about GPA more readily than they once did. As a result, it's quite common for most people to have GPAs above 6.5. You hear all those stories of people being upset or worried their GPA is 6.9, not 6.95 now, which of course is still uber elite. And this means that your goal, which once you would have been probably quite pragmatic, probably quite grounded and measured, it's like, okay, I'll accept anything from a 65 to an 85. I'm going to study for an 85. If I have a really bad day and get a 65, I still feel like things could break my way. Yeah, probably not now. That's just on maths alone. Though all of those quotas are there. So if you're a quota person, different game for you, of course. And then you've got the incumbent score effect diluting you for 3 years rather than over 1 year. So you just had 1 year of people coming in and probably only, 20% of your year left over. It wasn't a big effect. Now you've got years on years on years, and that could be significantly dilutive after a period of time. And that's something to consider. Definitely a different take on it to Emma. And as a result, Emma, I'm going to throw it to you because I now sound like the Grinch. Make this beautiful again.
Well, I think kind of as Kaiwan mentioned, if let's say you do take the GAMSAT at a time that works well for you, you've still got time left in uni, and you do get a good score, I think you have less pressure to, like, as I said, use it or lose it. So maybe you do need to dedicate a bit more time to your studies. Maybe now you do know, okay, I'm actually going to have to do the honors year because I've got this really good score and I definitely want to do medicine. And I'm hoping that potentially that will actually encourage people, not that they don't already, but I think just encourage people to choose meaningful honors projects rather than just doing an honors project because they just need to do an honors project and get a 7. That's a very different experience. We don't have honors in the US the same way, but just speaking to some of my fellow classmates, they were like, oh, I knew I had to do an honors project because I needed to get a 7 because I needed to use that. Because at UQ, for example, they basically wipe your undergraduate GPA and just replace it with your honors. So if you get a 7 in honors, you're done. But I think maybe this change will actually help those people who said, like, maybe I didn't do so well in undergrad. Maybe I finished my bachelor's a long time ago, or maybe I have a family that I need to take care of, but this is a good time for me to take the GAMSAT, and then I can figure out application kind of timelines in the future. I think inevitably, kind of GPA requirements are increasing. That pressure is very much felt even by like medical students. At UQ, we're still on a 7.0 scale, which is a bit tough. But there's this pressure to like, oh, if you want to get in, you know, those things can make you competitive for kind of specialty training programs and things like that. So I think that that's probably a downside, that it's kind of rolling over to the undergraduate students as well. But I don't know. I'm still cautiously optimistic that the benefits of hopefully just increasing the diversity of applicants, allowing a little bit more flexibility in whether you need to get a job for a few years and save up before applying to medicine, just figure out personal things, or potentially like pursue meaningful honors research and not feel rushed that it needs to be a 1-year gig, you're in and you're out. Will hopefully kind of like diversify that applicant profile. And I think that's really beneficial, not only for like medical schools to have more diverse students, but I think also in the long term to have like a more diverse profile of doctors in Australia and everywhere.
Job done. Kywin.
Yeah, actually, just wanted to say there are actually quite good takes in the chat. So just two commenters just said that well, on one hand, that scores are just going to go up moving forward. And I think the sentiment is that even without this change, GPA and GAMSAT requirements are always increasing year on year. Like that's not going to be any different to what it was pre this announcement, regardless. Whether or not it actually accelerates that that score jump further is sort of, well, we have to just wait and see. But at the end of the day, it is actually beneficial just sort of like in a professional sense for medical schools, where as one of the commenters said here, that so like Ella mentioned that it weeds out people who may want to pursue medicine for sort of maybe not the right reasons, and also it gives people the opportunity to have more of a life experience prior to actually getting in. Ultimately, I know this is like not a take that a lot of people want to hear, especially at this stage when you're trying to actually get in, but medicine is a journey, and it is it's about the experience trying to actually get in, and that whole journey shapes who you are as a person. And I can say for a fact from my own experience, it's definitely made me a more well-rounded individual, going through the hoops and the hurdles and all the difficulties to try and actually get into a medical program. And ultimately, I feel like that journey is something that a lot of people take for granted, because it's something that you don't really think of when you want to get it. And I think that if we have this 4-year currency, if you are not really quite in the mark for one particular aspect of your application, you can always take your time to actually get to where you want to be. And I think that's really powerful, because it makes you a better student, a better person when you get into the course, and it allows you to handle all the different, punches that come at you when you actually get into the medical degree, because it's really tough. And I think that's actually a really great benefit that is sort of hidden in this sort of, announcement. So maybe think of it in that way as well.
I might throw something in, just because everyone's coming up with great points and I'm feeling left out. We're talking a lot about kind of applications after you've done your undergrad, perhaps. We're talking about a lot about people that maybe their GPA wasn't great, and kind of that's that. But I think it's also worth looking at people earlier on in their undergrad. The fact that you can do, the GAMSAT now, hypothetically, even in year 12, not what I would recommend, but hypothetically, means that you now have a longer runway. No longer do you have to wait until, your second year, a year before applications to start that GAMSAT process. You can technically start in your first year, which is arguably a slightly easier year when you think about kind of uni workload and difficulty in general. So, for those that are really interested in having a very clean, kind of I finished my undergrad, and immediately after my undergrad, I transitioned into med. This, in a way, kind of gives you more resources to do that. You can now use your first year to go through your GAMSAT experience and potentially knock it out early. Therefore you have more chances to sit in and get the score that you need. A lot of times students that aren't in this position, in this kind of previous 2-year cycle, if they didn't get it in their second year or in their third year, they'd have to wait another year, sit it in September of their third year, and then have to delay the whole process, quote unquote. Although I completely agree with Emma, and Kywin, that these experiences that you have after your undergrad are all extremely beneficial and contribute. If that isn't something that you're necessarily hoping for, this change could make that a little bit easier as well.
Yeah, great takes, everyone, and really, really good to sort of hear that. I guess I'm going to have to be the old bitter one again. And it was interesting. I did see that really great comment in the chat. I'll keep it anonymous. But I do think in some senses this does weed out people that are kind of, just doing this for the prestige or doing it because they can, type of thing. With that said, where the bar is, there is a strong correlation with access to that level of in sort of education correlating to wealth. And obviously I'm also leaning into getting roasted here because there's a lot of sort of opinions on Fraser's being that type of an institution. However, it is the honest truth that, like, now that it's at sort of reaching those levels, people in very well-off situations could buy their academic performance. So that's why it's actually quite interesting, because this is something that's been flagged by the universities recently as something that they're wanting to crack down on and really look into. Is this currency of cheating that exists, and also wanting to ensure fairness across the board in assessment. So yeah, really, really interesting in that sense. And that's probably a good segue into sort of the next slides. So I don't think, given that we don't know which unis are going to be doing this, probably not worth speculating on how the scores will shift for the individual unis. If we did, that would be different. But this is just kind of the state of play right now. But this is who wins from a conspiracy perspective. And it's interesting. I'd be, again, really keen on Emma's angle, given that she's had some experience in the US. But in the US, there's a very clear pathway system when you go to study medicine. And that works very well for institutions. Works so well that you have almost an entire private system that exists outside of the standard university system on these pathways for things like medical school. So some universities have been experimenting with this. Some universities have a postgraduate diploma that you can do that gets you an automatic interview at the university. Some have GAMSAT subjects within their MedSci courses. And it's a slippery slope toward that eventually becoming, like, will it become like the American system where a pre-med degree is really a pre-med degree, or will it just become an excuse for getting more people back into those pathway courses? Again, thinking of the examples we gave before, nurses, professionals that have gone and had families and now come back, or what have you. Now they've got enough time to do a whole biomed degree. So they could just go back and enroll and do the whole thing. That's very, very beneficial for the universities. I don't think ASA were behind this. I think you would look at it and go, well, they're a big winner. They're going to get so many more GAMSAT registrants. True. But ASA just does so much stuff. I feel like if they were told about this, they would have been gone, yeah, fine. But on the whole, I feel like GEMSAS or GEMPAS, whatever they're calling themselves these days, are the ones that will be guiding and driving this decision. And yeah, a lot of this is is the business now that is a university, and its ability to extend something called customer lifetime value. So it's like, oh, not finished, not sure post-undergrad, do an honours. Not sure post that, do a PhD. Maybe do another degree. We'll give you some bonuses and credit points, like keep the churn going in the system, keep the customer for longer. So that's, it's interesting what Kaiwen immediately thought. That's what I immediately thought when I heard 4 years. But then I've also had a lot of interaction in my previous jobs and what have you with the university, with the central part of universities, and that's precisely how they think. So and anyone from central universities watching that now would just be like, yeah, it is. So yeah, that's the other potential look at things here, is that, you know, in order now to get these GPAs up and almost separate GAMSAT and GPA, we're probably going to spend a bit more money on our degrees. I know I keep throwing it to you, Emma, but yeah, what's your thoughts on that?
Yeah, I think I'd also probably put students. I know I'm the optimistic one, but I think I would put students in there as the winner. I think potentially there actually may be less people sitting each GAMSAT because your score now lasts 4 years. Maybe you might hit a lucky day when like less people just happen to be sitting the GAMSAT. So that could really kind of change the score profile, probably not drastically, but you know, I think it takes off maybe the pressure. I know there's a lot of pressure around like which GAMSAT date you choose and when you're going to apply and use that. And so I think potentially this takes a little bit of the pressure off of that now that you have a little bit more flexibility. While there will be people who are taking it early, and I would strongly not recommend doing that, like potentially straight out of year 12. I think that, yeah, I'm hopeful that like, while you may have more people who are just like, oh, I'll take it on a whim. I mean, it's a pretty expensive thing to do on a whim, so I'm not sure there'll be that many people considering that. But yeah, I think it'll be interesting to see if there is any change to kind of score profiles from that. I think in the realm of like this pre-med pathway, I hope it actually doesn't go that way. I think that that's the benefit of kind of the Australian undergraduate system and not having this strict pre-med pathway is like you graduate with a good degree that actually means something. Whereas like my undergraduate degree, while it's technically the same, it's a bachelor's, for like getting jobs and things like that in the US, people just look at you and they're like, oh, well, you're not in medical school yet. So like you basically aren't going to get a job anywhere, you know? So that was pretty rough coming out of undergrad and people being like, this is not a real degree. Like you're just in this transition state. So I hope it doesn't actually go that way. But I think the kind of longer run benefit for the unis of like getting more people to maybe stay on for an honors or extend into a PhD or just building that, I think will be beneficial also for students, because I think kind of as Kieran also mentioned, like the rejection really makes sure that you want to be able to do it. And so I think maybe in this kind of same stream is like that maybe the time, the less pressure will also make sure you really want to do medicine. It's really hard and a really long journey, and it's not necessarily a very immediately gratifying kind of response, even when you're in. So I think, yeah, maybe just that I'm hopeful that like allowing kind of this longer time frame will just benefit students who maybe are on the fence. And as someone mentioned in the chat, maybe also kind of lead people who maybe don't want to do medicine or are thinking about medicine for the wrong reasons to a career that's actually going to be more beneficial for them. And that's a win-win for everyone.
I have a bit of a question that I'll throw out again for the sake of conspiracy. I was just wondering if anybody thought that this had something to do with some of the shifts that we've seen regarding scores, especially over the last couple of years. So over, the kind of COVID years, we have seen a bit of a shift in the curve where scores kind of increased a little bit. Not that isn't a hard increase, but the proportion of people that were getting above a 70 did increase. So I'm just wondering if now this shift to kind of a 4 years ends up, at least in the immediate future, ends up potentially being slightly detrimental to those in maybe the next coming years, considering, and this is speculative, but considering that, for example, this last September GAMSAT, the curve shifted slightly back to almost pre-COVID times. What do you all think about that?
I mean, you can calibrate GAMSAT to GAMSAT. So that's something that ACER can do, and I'm pretty sure they actually have patented technology to be able to do that. And I'm sure GEMSAS would tap into that to make sure that they're measuring people appropriately between the different GAMSAT settings. And I was saying to someone today, like, I do remember ages ago, it was like 2013 or something, when the median was 52. Like it has moved over time. I think it's one of those things, like, depending on the sample size and the window that you're looking at it, it looks appreciable. But in recent times, it's actually been quite static. They've been doing a pretty decent job of keeping the curves relatively similar.
Yeah, I don't know enough about it to really make an insightful comment, but I do think, as Scott kind of mentioned earlier, it is in some way kind of this this point of privilege. If you have enough money to be able to take a prep course, if you have enough money to take it multiple times, like each time you sit it, arguably you're going to be kind of pushing that curve. And as medicine becomes more kind of elite in that way, I think then you get kind of those people following. And so that's maybe kind of what moves that curve. But yeah, I do think there needs to be still a lot of work done to actually make it a lot more approachable and a lot more diverse, because it's really, it's not beneficial just to have a bunch of people who are like-minded from similar backgrounds in a room. We need definitely the variety and the diversity. And that's where it is tough, because if scores do keep increasing, then you do kind of miss out on some of those people who maybe just like aren't brilliant test takers, or there's other circumstances going on that are preventing them from really being able to like pursue their passion of medicine just because of a score on a test.
And that's another thing that's great about Australia, is that you can apply with a GAMSAT score and a GPA. There's no, I mean, UQ still has prereqs, but it may not soon. Melbourne used to, doesn't now. So there's less of that emphasis on you must have X, Y, and Z just to be able to apply. Whereas, of course, in the US and the UK, it's quite the opposite. You must have those basically the science undergrad. I think in the UK, even now, it's science with honours, with the exception of one or two universities. And interestingly, they are the GAMSAT unis that are making those exceptions. And we're starting to see that open up in the UK. So yeah, I completely agree with you, Emma. It's great to have a very heterogeneous population of medical students from all walks of life. And they mean, as a group of students, you're learning from each other as well, rather than just ending up with groupthink. Yeah. Okay. So, I mean, what does this mean for March 2023? Well, if you're coming with a relatively non-competitive GAMSAT score, and I guess what we're talking about there is sort of 65 and below, and you don't fit into one of the quotas, yeah, you should probably be starting your study again. Competitive GAMSAT scores, I think now you've got to really reassess what competitive means, whether you're happy enough with it, or whether you need to double down and go back around the block again. However, now you can drive many times around the roundabout and potentially use all of those opportunities. So that is, I guess, cause for pause in deciding which one we're really going to double down on, where we're going to use our resources if we choose to. I think there's also something to be said for being in a very good frame of mind and state of mind on the day of the exam. And a lot of that is extrinsic factors. So yeah, making sure that you're in just the best possible place to put your best foot forward. And once upon a time, sort of as Carmen was alluding to, you couldn't do that because you were juggling like 15 things all at the same time. Maybe now you can, and you can just go in and be relaxed and do well.
Scott, I guess I just want to quickly mention that I think that this right here is actually going to be the primary driver of that increase in scores. So, you know how Emma, you mentioned that maybe people, will get this a good score and then they might just kind of leave it there. I suspect that it'll actually be something more similar to this, that scores will increase because people that have already gotten a good score, say a 72 or a 73, now have an additional opportunity and go, well, maybe I'll just try again, and maybe I'll just try again, and maybe I'll just try again, because there now is the opportunity for that. So I suspect that that might be one of the reasons that scores just kind of keep slowly creeping up. Again, not to kind of frighten people, because maybe it's you that's causing the scores to go up. Maybe you're the one that's, gotten an 80 and now you're thinking, well, maybe I could get an 85 or something. But, I think that might be one of the main reasons why scores will just kind of creep up slightly.
I hope no one's resitting if they've got an 80.
It's funny. I met someone once who had an 80. And because they thought it was like a high school test, they thought they'd done just okay. Like, should I sit it again? I feel like I should sit it again. I feel like you're fine. Yeah. So these are the approximate dates. The official dates will be released soon. Stay tuned to all the official channels to get that. We always do our best to update once they release them, but we definitely can't update before ASA makes announcements or GEMSAS releases guides. That's entirely with them. So follow them. Cool. So, otherwise, if you have any other questions, you want to chat about this stuff and get advice from lovely people such as Emma and many others that are ever optimistic and always advocating for the student, then please join our community. It is a good positive space to do that. That's why it was invented. And yeah, you can chat about all things med careers, and yeah, your eventual and Dent as well, and your eventual destination. If you want to reach out to us, these are our emails. You're always welcome to contact us directly. Otherwise, we might do some Q&A. Is there any Q&A that needs A-ing?
Yeah, actually, there was one really good question here at the very start. So I guess sort of maybe this is the best question for you, Scott. In light of the recent changes, what are some GAMSAT preparation strategies that you would recommend to make Fraser students much more competitive?
Oh, geez. I feel like it's stuff that we already do, but it's and interestingly, it's kind of what Emma was proposing as well. It's about having sort of time clearly set aside, because the programs and the courses are the minimum, they're not the maximum. So this type of learning is not about rocking up at class, and if you rock up to your classes, you'll ace the exam type of thing. That's what you do as a child. That's why it's called pedagogical learning, because it's for children. We're talking here about andragogical learning, which is for adults. So there's a need there to be more self-directed, more self-driven, more reflective, and more active outside. And more active doesn't mean just doing sheerly more hours. It means critically reflecting on your performance, on the way you've been doing things, seeing if you can change things positively and sort of retesting that, almost being scientific, like retesting things for yourself, seeing if something sticks, and if it does, like holding on to that as a strategy or a methodology. So yeah, I really feel like planning is just becoming the big difference these days between students that really nail it, students that just do well. So I would say that's we do that at the start with all of our students anyway. But even if you're not a Fraser student, just plan these next few months so that you can succeed.
Yeah, and actually, just to add something a little bit more to like what Scott's just said, I think the biggest difference with my score jump was actually, in my first 3 sittings, I got a relatively similar score, and it was a relatively low score all 3 times. And then I changed my prep for it to be a lot more structured. And I had a clear plan from very far out prior to the GAMSAT. And I knew exactly what I was going to be doing and what goals I wanted to reach. And I guess the greatest thing about, like, for example, the Frasers course is actually the fact that it's essentially a plan that is set out for you from the very start. And there are clear goals and there are clear milestones that you'll reach along the way when you actually go through it, in addition to having all the resources that you need under the sun. So for anyone who's like thinking about how best to approach it, just try and think about planning in the best way that you can. And if you need help to actually do that, feel free to reach out. Yeah.
I think also I'd just add, I didn't take the Fraser's GAMSAT course, so I'm not sure if this is built in, but I think kind of when doing anything difficult in your life, practicing reflection is really important. Maybe things aren't going as well. Maybe you didn't meet your kind of study goals for the week, but just working in time to actually like have a little reality check with yourself and be like, okay, so how did this go? How am I learning? Am I making progress? And maybe trying to address some of the mental hurdles is really important. I kind of talked about that with a lot of my interview students, and just really like encouraging them, even if they felt like a station was really difficult, or maybe it's a section that you're working on is really difficult. Just kind of like think about it and break it down mentally, maybe into smaller kind of tangible pieces. And sometimes that's also helpful. It's not only a test of kind of your skill and your critical thinking, but it is also like a mental kind of marathon. It's a long exam. And so you need to be mentally prepared that it is going to be difficult, and you need to be prepared for how you're going to mentally work through that on the day of the exam. And so that really comes, I think, with a lot of reflection and kind of just problem solving for your own self.
Completely agree. All the times I sat it without studying, and oftentimes more just for R&D purposes. And what I mean by that is, like, I know a lot of people think, oh, you wanted to see the questions that they were writing, so you copy them. No, that's what petty people do. For me, it's a bigger game. I actually just want to see if I can beat ACER. It's like trying to clock the game, and try some different theories against their testing machine. And back then it was all written. So was yours written, Emma, or were you digital?
I took mine online, and I actually luckily got to take it over 2 days because it was during COVID. So that was really nice.
Yeah, we started at like, I mean, you get there for a 9 a.m. start, and you finished at like 3 p.m. thereabouts. But it really meant that you arrived at the venue at like 8 a.m. And so it was a mental slog. And for me, that was what was kind of cool, was like, because we were at the Melbourne Showgrounds. One of the times I sat at, you're sitting up in the bleachers just outside the pavilion, watching, dare I say it, all these people like rushing to get in. Like, why would you rush to get in? To sit anxiously at your seat for an hour. Like even the mental gameplay that's going on between yourself and ACER, to be able to control your environment as best you possibly could, so that when you went in there, you were relaxed. Because a lot of times students, they study really hard and then they underwhelm in their performance. Then they'll do it again with absolutely no prep, even though they'd prepped some time ago. Everyone thinks you forget all that stuff, but it's there, subconscious. And all of a sudden they do well. And they're like, I can't think why. But the reason you did well is because you weren't just weighed down by brain fog. You were thinking clearly. This is the best version of yourself when you're alert. You probably actually slept well the night before because you didn't have that anxiety and stress keeping you up. So, your brain's functional, you're functional. And what do you know? You go in and you do really well. So that was always one of the benefits I thought I had from going in there, is I didn't have that anxiety of like a lot riding on that test date. Emma mentioned it before, like I'm not someone that loves tests generally, unless I'm kind of doing them for fun. So had I been taking it to get into medicine, I probably would have performed worse, I think, because the psychological pressure would have been a factor. But when you've got no skin in the game, it's really easy to kind of just almost be meta to what's going on and kind of see how, oh, that's creative, Asa. I love how you've written that question, but the answer is B. Carry on, next question. And yeah, no one else is really doing it like that, with the exception of a very few that do have those very strong reflective skills, ability to keep it calm and cool and collected. Yeah, another reason why we simulate the actual mock exams, because it is worth knowing how you'll handle the moment, not just the content.
Yeah, it's definitely equally like sort of like it's not just about like the knowledge, it's also about like the strategy, about everything that you do prior to the exam and sitting it, and it's all very taxing mentally and physically as well, for sure. Just have just one question that's here in the chat, Scott. So just to clarify, do you think that these changes will drive cutoffs up? And for students with a score of 70 or higher, can we expect there to be a change that affects those students?
My opinion is yes and yes. So just numerically, I think the increased supply will mean the nature of the demand will become skewed towards those higher scores. So yeah, if you're trying to choose, I don't know, this is pretty bad analogy. You're trying to choose the best apples from the apple tray, and once upon a time you had a thing where it's like 2 bruises or less. Well, now that you've got a tray where most of them have 2 bruises or less, well, of course it's going to become 1 bruise or less. That's just what happens if you've got an oversupply of the thing that you're looking for. So I think it has to shift. And yeah, that means probably if you have that score of 70 and you're feeling quite good about it, still feel good about it. You've done very well, like really well, to get that score. Is it enough to kind of rest upon? I think that's the question now. And I think someone had a really good question before about whether previous scores will now become automatically sort of available to this new rule, which I actually don't know the answer to. If they do, then I think that's cause, at least in the initial few years, for some relief, because you've got some more currency of that score and more time to work out what you want to do.
Yeah, I think it's hard to kind of fully predict. We don't have a crystal ball, but I think just statistically, there's probably going to be more people taking the test, which means you'll have more number of people kind of in that 70 plus range, or like top 10%. So yeah, it is going to become more competitive, kind of score wise, which is tough. And because I think it's a benefit that the Australian system only uses GAMSAT and GPA. Like the US, there's so many other hoops you need to jump through. So yeah, it is tough, but yeah, I think it's still tricky, but it's still a huge accomplishment to get above 70, as Scott said. That's incredible.
Yeah, you've done well.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's about it for all the questions that we have for now. Everything's relatively answered well in the Q&A section if anyone else wants to take a look. Anything else that you want to touch on, Scott?
No, otherwise I think hopefully that's useful for everyone. Take out of it what you can. Feel free to leave what you don't like. And equally, these are just really hot takes. So don't take it as gospel. Don't feel like everything's radically changed now. I know we can sometimes do that with GAMSATs, like with curve shifting and whatnot. So yeah, just remember this is it's a bit of a change, but ultimately, if you're prepping for the GAMSAT, the way you prep now shouldn't change drastically unless you were potentially prepping very wrongly beforehand. continue with your plan, execute, believe in yourself, and hopefully you get a great result that allows you to feel confident about next steps.
Absolutely, absolutely. Yeah. And I guess just before we head off, I just want to just plug one more thing just about our Frasers medical community. It's a free resource that everyone can be a part of, whether you're a Fraser student or not. It really doesn't matter. Tutors are always there active on that platform, and you can feel free to post on it as if it's a forum, and just ask tutors any questions, or even PM tutors if you have any particular questions about the course or about any particular content or anything like that. And I feel like it's a really underused resource by a lot of pre-medical students. So for anyone here who's watching, or anyone who's attending, make sure to check it out, just because it's definitely something that will benefit you if you get a part of it. So yeah, definitely use all the resources you can, especially when you're preparing for such a high stakes exam. For sure.
Cool.
Awesome.
Thanks, everybody. Thanks for knocking this together, Kaiwan. And thank you, Emma, for your time and your wonderful insights. And I think most importantly, your positivity, your fantastic attribute. So yeah, thank you, everyone. And thanks to Kieran, who had to jump off. And hopefully we'll catch you all soon, whether it's on communities, more webinars, or just in general.
Great. Awesome. Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.